Hi, Gene Monterastelli here, the editor of tappingqanda.com. The video that you are about to watch is a conversation that was a part of this year's 24 Hours of Tapping. The 24 Hours of Tapping is a fundraiser for the amazing work that is done by the Peaceful Heart Network. The Peaceful Heart Network has brought tapping to migrants, refugees, prisoners, and the underprivileged in over 30 countries all over the world. As you watch this video, if you learned something, if you were touched by it, if you were inspired by it, the easiest way to say thank you is to support the work of the Peaceful Heart Network. To do that, all you need to do is go to 24hoursoftapping.com/support. And as you look in the description and the first comment down below, you will see a direct link to that. I hope you enjoy this conversation.
Thank you, Jean. And you're absolutely right. We are the Aussie pair coming up. So I'm thrilled to actually introduce to you Jules Vandermaat, who is here in Australia with me. A little bit about Jules. She particularly enjoys training mental health professionals how to use EFT safely and gently, and particularly in the trauma space. So as Jean said, we are continuing this conversation. She first discovered EFT on Facebook about 6 years ago when she was working for a local sexual assault centre, and she was amazed how quickly it actually helped her clients recover from PTSD, anxiety, depression, and lots of other trauma-related issues, and particularly shame and guilt coming in there too. So she was it helped herself with burnout and reinvigorating her passion for her own work. So welcome, Jules. Thank you for joining us. You're in Australia with me.
Yay. Hey, Peter. How are you?
Fabulous. We are having a conversation in the next 40-odd minutes about particularly the use, and it really dovetails nicely with Craig's conversation about trauma in general, but just taking it that step further into sort of, the applications in the sexual assault and sexual trauma kind of space. And I know you're an absolute expert in this area, and it really is a skill area that you're uniquely skilled in. Tell me, from your point of view, we've just had a conversation with Craig about safety and trust. And I know you mentioned something about, what did you say? Don't go tapping on the first date, even first session. Craig really talked to that as well. But
okay.
How have you seen this be, a process and a technique that clients, particularly with sexual assault or sexual trauma in their histories, how is it accepted by them? Perhaps they know about EFT, maybe they don't. Like, how does that process go?
Well, when I first started, when I was working at the sexual assault service, a lot of people didn't know about it. It was kind of new. And, the response was amazing. Like, people are desperate, like the people that I was working with, many of them had decades of talk therapy that either really hadn't helped very much, sometimes had re-traumatized them. A lot of these people had tried so many different things to get some relief and to feel better, that they were just like, if I already had a sort of some kind of relationship with them, they felt trust in me, they'd say, whatever you reckon, they're happy. Most people, the vast majority, were happy to give it a go. And, the odd person here and there wasn't, and I had to just accept that. But yeah, I found, and most people could feel in a very short period of time, wow, something is happening. Like, I can feel, I remember one woman said to me, I feel like I've just smoked a joint. Like,
oh wow. I haven't heard that analogy.
I used to get that a fair bit. And another one, I've never been this calm in my life. Like, they actually, their poor system has just been stuck in the on position for such a long time that the feeling of regulation felt kind of foreign and sometimes weird, actually. Sometimes it felt like, this, some of them would be like, I don't know if this is going to be good for me, because they would feel like they need to be on alert. But anyway, yeah, mostly very positive. And then when I left the sexual assault service and went into private practice, and I deliberately chose to never register with Medicare, like to never have any rebates, because I'd been there and done that in a previous private practice life. So I really made the choice. I'm only doing EFT and people will be full fee paying. And I have always had a wait list from the get-go. So, you know, I guess what I say to a lot of my mentees who are doing certification with me, a lot of them are psychologists and social workers and therapists, like, there's a demand. People are looking for, particularly mental health professionals who are really good at EFT. It's not, you know, people are actually, the more that EFT becomes mainstream, like thanks to things like this, and the more people like you do research and promote the efficacy of it, people are looking for it. People just want to feel better. They don't really care how it happens.
Yeah. And I think you're right, you know, standard question in therapy. So what would you like out of this? I just want to be happy. You know, that's the basic global question, isn't it? And the answer.
Yeah.
You mentioned about nervous system just in that, and really good point, because if people, it can be such a difference to feel like you've just smoked a joint, or, you know, after taking a space, because your nervous system's been so on edge for so long, it's normal. So what are tips that you might offer a client, particularly in this space of sexual trauma, to befriend their nervous system, even if that's before you introduce tapping?
Yeah, so I, in my first session, I spend a lot of time doing just education, you know, about the nervous system, about how trauma shows up. And I tend to use the Irene Lyon language, and I talk about trapped survival stress, you know what I mean? Because everybody doesn't relate to trauma. You know, some people come and say, I don't really think I have any trauma, but everybody has survival stress trapped in their body. And so I guess, I spend a lot of time kind of explaining, you know, in the first session, when we're tapping, like you might all of a sudden feel really sick in the stomach. And your job is to let me know that that's what's happening, so that we can pause, I can adjust my approach. You know, we might need to focus a bit more on the body in that situation. Or you might feel like, you know, with sexual trauma, a lot of people will start to feel the throat starting to close up.
Right.
And so, you know, this is a common thing that can happen for lots of people. So if that happens, just let me know. And so I really spend a lot of time, you know, trying to prepare people for any, you know, you mightn't feel anything much in the body, and that's okay. We can still work with that. You might feel very strong emotion, not much in the body. You might feel a lot in the body, but not much in terms of emotions or whatever. So I guess I spend a lot of time kind of preparing, and I like to show, you know, like the Peter Levine, the body hold. Like I'm such a fan of that. If I can't sleep, that's what I do.
Can we just talk that through, everybody? So it's like one hand
under the armpit.
Yep.
And the other hand, I tend to put it on the bicep, or you can also put it on the shoulder, but for some reason, for me, it feels better on the bicep. What's
Peter's kind of analogy around that? Like, what does that do for us?
It just helps us to remind the body that we are a container, and you can feel your container. You know what I mean? So here we are. Oh, I'm in my body. It's okay. And this is really good if people are starting to feel a bit overwhelmed. It's a nice way to end a session. It's a nice way if you feel like, you know, like sometimes I notice with clients that the focus on events and words and emotions and specifics, sometimes it's just all getting a bit too much for the system. And so in that case, you know, like often I'll stop and do a bit of just silent tapping is my favourite thing. Or I might also just do this, you know, and just really I could combine some orienting with that and just say, you know, feeling your feet on the floor and just go through almost a little, you know, softening the upper body, sending some breath to the belly, blah, blah, blah. And people just, like, for lots of people, it's a bit like the 9 gamut. It just seems to kind of like the system just comes down. So anyway, I will show that to people in the first session and just say this can be a really good one, even before we do any tapping. This is something you can do at the supermarket or waiting to pick your kid up from school if you're feeling a bit anxious. So so I sort of do spend a lot of time resourcing basically in that first session. So understanding who is this person, what are their resources, what are they bringing in the way of resources? Because that's really important. I do not want to be the only person in this person's life if they have suicidal thoughts, feelings, if they're in a, risky situation. So anyway, I'm kind of doing an assessment. I'm getting to know them. I'm really also doing some goal setting. So what are you wanting to get out of this? I mean, I find a lot of my clients say things like, I just want to be more present to my children, right? Or I just don't want to wake up in a panic. I don't want to I just want to stop feeling overwhelmed all day, every day. Yeah. So I guess, and we'll do like a little, a couple of rounds of silent tapping just to see what that feels like, a couple of rounds of orienting tapping. And I might do tap and rant if they're pretty chill.
Can you just explain, what do you mean?
Tap and rant, it's my favourite. It's probably my go-to. I think it is for lots of EFT practitioners. So tap and rant is where you're just in the moment. Like, let's say, you went to pick your child up from school and the teacher made some remark about, your child wasn't very appropriate today and she was a bit, rude to you or implied that it was your fault or something. And you felt really like you just were annoyed about the way that person spoke to you. So, that's the kind of thing that in the way home in the car, I would so you don't need to go even though I feel, because you're really in it already. So annoyed. I'm really annoyed about her saying that to me. How rude. How dare she say that to me in front of my child? I'm annoyed. I'm annoyed in my head.
Yep.
I feel like my head's going to explode. I'm annoyed. So, often just doing a couple of rounds so that in the first session I'll show that to clients. This is just something you can do just to give it a go.
Discharge, yeah.
And they love it.
And I find teenagers, I let teenagers swear. So if they want to drop with a few kind of cuss words, they can. And
absolutely.
And I'm just going to circle back in case anyone's wondering. You mentioned 9 gamut, but just if anyone is unfamiliar, was part of the original recipe of EFT that used some eye movements and things like that. So if people can have a quick Google if they want a 9 gamut. I'm talking about the container. You mentioned boundaries.
Yeah.
Are there themes that are common, and is boundaries one of them, in clients that have had a history of sexual trauma? Is boundaries, poor boundaries, an issue or a theme, and are there other ones that are common that you see?
Yeah, definitely. So I find that boundaries is a big theme for people who've experienced sexual trauma because and they don't even necessarily need to have an awareness of this, but their boundaries have been crossed, like at some point in their life. And often it's not a single incident, like a lot of my clients, it might have started in early years and then happened again in, primary school and then high school, and then been in relationships with people who were abusive in many different ways. So often, it's pretty rare that I see someone who's only been sexually assaulted once, to be honest. Like if it happens in childhood, you are actually more at risk of it happening again later in life.
Yeah.
So in terms of the way I come with that knowledge that boundaries are an issue, so I need to be really conscious of the boundaries that I have as a person, as a professional, and be communicating in a way that shows that I really respect their boundaries. And that could be from like not messaging outside of my working hours, that could be, not getting into kind of little nice messages about how was that last night, or like not setting up expectations of yourself outside of being a practitioner. Because people who have poor boundaries who just haven't learned how to have those kinds of relationships, or people who are kind of really looking for someone to fill some gaps for them, you can just end up in trouble with yourself and them. And as we need to sort of just be aware that to not be offering more than we can realistically, we're not their friend. We're there to kind of help them with something. But so boundaries is important. And I think, to me, that is part of the no tapping on the first date. Yes. Because really, I don't think people really think about it like this, but I just know because I've worked in this niche for so long, doing EFT is actually working with a person's body. So even though you're not touching the person, you're not doing the tapping, like I work 95% online, so I'm not even in a room with anyone anymore, but you are taking a person into their body and they don't know what that's going to be like. Do you know what I mean? And people who know that they've experienced sexual trauma in their past, that can be really frightening for them, right? Because they can be like, oh, what am I going to remember? What's going to come up for me? How will that be? I don't want to think about it. I don't want to go there. So, when I worked at the sexual assault service, I had people that, it took me 5 goes to get them in the room. They were so anxious just about coming at all to even, even thinking about even talking about it. As in that this happened to me 30 years ago, like that's such a big deal. Yes. So we have to be really respectful that for lots of people who've experienced trauma and sexual trauma definitely, they don't feel safe in their bodies. They have a fear of being vulnerable. A lot of them have an issue around it's not safe to speak up. Right, like it's not safe to say what I think or how I feel, and that's very much in the body. And here we are just expecting us to come in and tell them about how they're thinking and how they're feeling, and to be really vulnerable when they have no good experience of that often, right? Like, yeah, and they have fear about rejection. A lot of my clients feel like they're weird. A really big one is I'm too much. Right, I'm too much, because they get overwhelmed easily, like people that have PTSD, for example, or complex PTSD, or even anxiety, situations that other people find to be not a problem. A person who has a trauma history can be very triggering for them, so everything feels like too much for them. And when they share that with a person who has no experience or understanding, that's like, what are you so stressed about? Like, it's just a party. What are you worried about going to the party for? And so, yeah, for lots of my clients, the tapping is about like how I'm too much. So we need, we need to understand and accept that, and then set up the sessions so that we're not straight away putting them in a position where they're going to feel like, I'm too much. See, I'm too much. Or to be vulnerable, to feel exposed. And just, that thing about consent as well. So, like I said before, people will come and what they want is to feel better, and they will do anything. Like, people are desperate. And so I've had a lot of people come to me who've had previous experience with EFT that hasn't felt safe and hasn't felt safe, right? Because the person, the practitioner has thought, we've got to go back and work on those childhood memories. We need to process those earlier events, and then you'll feel better. And the fact of the matter is, it's not true. Yeah. It doesn't make people better all the time. And a lot of the time it makes people worse. And so anyway, trust is a big problem. And so the whole situation that the person's putting themselves in this position that is like the absolute opposite to feeling safe for them by coming to you. So I just spend a lot of time saying, we're not going to be doing any tapping in the first session, and just the relief. Oh, God. They're like, good. Yeah, good, right? And we're not going to be working on any childhood memories in the first few sessions. And if a memory comes up, we're going to just decide what we're going to do with it, right? If it's appropriate and you want to, and we've got time, we'll work on it. But if you, because often the people just say to me like, oh, no way, I don't, no. There's a lot of physical aversion to, I definitely don't want to work on that. It's okay.
So true.
Yeah. So I spend a lot of time on recent and future events. Like that's...
Yeah, good. And I'm reminded of Craig just in the interview where he said it takes great strength to go slowly in these trauma spaces as the practitioner, because we know that tapping can work fast. We know that, the research supports that as well, where half the time is gold standard other talk therapies. But it takes great strength to go, no, we're not going to do that. We're actually going to Hey, I want to ask you because you said something then that I think we've got a changing world now, and I won't really know how do you manage this. You said 95% of your sessions now are online, and because this is such a niche area, is there anything different that you find you need to do working with trauma or sexual trauma in the online space that maybe would be different than if you had them in person? Like is there any other information like an emergency contact that would be important to have for a person in case they just turn the computer off? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think I was always doing that, but I think it is more important, you know, that you have a contact person, that you have email addresses, that you have an understanding of who else is in your life, right? Are you seeing a doctor? Have you got a psychotherapist? Have you got a psychologist? Have you got a psychiatrist? Like, who's your team?
Yep.
I mean, it hasn't happened to me actually, but it would be very tricky if you had a client that you were concerned about in terms of their mental health and they're in another country and you've got no idea.
Yeah.
Like, you know, that they were having a very bad time. I mean, I basically wasn't working with people that had any kind of active suicidal ideation. Really, I would sort of screen out for that, just because I don't want to be. I've spent, you know, most of my life working the mental health system. I don't want to be worrying about that. But you know, like let's say it's something that occasionally comes on for a person, you just want to be sure that you're not the only person, that they have, you know, that. A lot of my clients come and they already have a psychologist, and I'm like, oh, good. So I'm just doing the EFT. And it'll probably be better than what your psychologist is.
We didn't say that.
We didn't say that. That's what people say, right? I got more out of one session of EFT than I have in 10 years of talk therapy. But I still like to have that psychologist there to be, you know, your job is the kind of the mental health and just doing something. Yeah.
You mentioned working a lot in the future. Now, I know you have a banana bread analogy. So the food crazy lady loves the food analogies. So tell everyone, tell us about this banana bread analogy, how you came up with it, and how it kind of relates to this future, you know.
Yeah. So look, I just found that in the group of people that I was working with, when I was trying to explain the tabletop and the legs, people would just look at me like, oh, I've got tables on tables on tables. Like, how long is this going to take? Forever? I've got so many tables, you know. And I just felt like it just didn't really land for some reason. And I sort of just used to think like, you know, I sort of started it as a way to explain the generalization effect, right? So let's say you want to work on your anxiety. So here's a loaf of banana bread that represents your anxiety. And the way we're going to work on the anxiety is each week I'm going to have you just cut off a slice of the loaf of anxiety, and I always use my little phone thing, and cut the slice into 4 little pieces, and the piece represents a recent time you felt anxious or a time that's coming up when that you think you'll feel anxious, right? So a recent or a future event. Right. And quite often we'll focus on future stuff. So let's say, oh, well, I'm feeling anxious because this weekend I have to go to a hen's night and I'm just so socially awkward and I just know that I'm going to get there and hate it and want to go home. Mm-hmm. So I kind of started using it as a way to explain that, you know, we don't have to go back to your early memories if you don't want to. Relief. We're going to work on just things that haven't happened yet or things that happened recently. And your body is so intelligent that it can use that little piece of banana bread to process whatever it needs to process about stuff from whenever, right? So you don't need to know the memories. Like, you don't need to know what happened. You don't need to talk about it. We don't need to go there, because your body and your brain is actually designed to work on that stuff by working on this stuff. And people be like, oh, wow, that's cool. I mean, they don't believe you at first, but then you start tapping on thinking about going to the hen's night on Saturday night, and the person says, I feel it in my throat, you know, I'm just going to freeze. I won't be able to be normal. I won't be able to talk. They're going to think I'm weird. I'm too much. I'm going to end up in the bathroom crying. I'm going to want to go home, blah, 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 blah. anyway, I mean, what often will come out is limiting beliefs that are kind of in there from earlier events. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess I just came up with it because it just seemed like a really practical way. And people related to the banana bread. Like, I love banana bread. And they'd say to me, like, I've got a good piece of banana bread for us this week, Jules. Right?
Yeah.
And I will spend whole sessions often on one piece of banana bread, like one little, and just squeeze as much kind of juice out of that one event, keep coming back to that one event until it's like until there's almost no charge. And then if there's time, we might do something else. But often my clients, so much stuff comes up out of just something that hasn't happened yet or something that just happened, that it's really such a nice, safe way to do it. And, like I just talk about the safe time zone. So for people with a lot of trauma and people who really feel very anxious and reluctant about doing earlier memories, if I can say to them, we're just going to stick with these events and your body knows how to do it, right? Your body knows how to use those events to process old stuff. They're like, oh, wow, that's great. And so, at the beginning of the session, so currently your anxiety about the hens night on Saturday night is a 9 out of 10 and you feel sick in your stomach. Our goal is going to be just to cut that in half if we can. Oh, that'd be so good. I might be able to go, And often if you do a good job and, well, depending on their body really, often you can get it down to a 0 or a 1 or a 2 and they leave the session feeling great about going to the party. So, yeah, I've sort of come to call this future-focused EFT. You know what I mean? Like, what's the goal? What do you want to work on? What do you want to feel better about? What do you want to be able to do? So rather than going back into the past and we're going to go through all the horrible things that have happened to you, nobody wants to do that. They will do it if they think it's necessary to get better, but nobody really wants to do that. So when people know, like, oh, we're going to work like this, we're going to work on what do I want to feel? Well, I want to be able to relax. I want to be able to sleep. I want to be able to go to work and not feel like killing people, right? I want to be present in my life to my children and my loved ones. Like, that's the sort of stuff people actually want. People don't want Mercedes and big houses, and people that come to me just want to feel like kind of normal.
Yeah, safe and happy and calm. That's so true.
Yeah, and I use the loaf as, so it represents the problem, as in the anxiety, and it can also be the goal, right? So we're working on reducing anxiety. That's what we're doing here. Yeah. Anyway, it's a nice, simple.
It is. It absolutely. It's such a good one. I hope people can find a banana loaf analogy that might work for you as well. Yeah. Jules, I've done a bit of work recently with lawyers, groups of lawyers, so practices where what's really affecting them is vicarious trauma, as in the reading of the client files, and so whilst they're learning EFT, they're also being more mindful and aware of how these things are dealt with in-house when they have clients that are representing, but also client file information and things like that. And I can only imagine, because sexual trauma is not my specialty, like how do you, apart from tapping, how do you come to this and protect yourself from something like compassion fatigue, but burnout, but vicarious trauma? Because like you said before, we're working with the body. We're very close. Heart math shows us the minute you're within 6 feet of someone, your heart coherence is being affected by someone else's. Yeah. How do you look after yourself in this process?
Yeah. Look, I do so much self-care, really. I have a session. I have a swap session every week that's 90 minutes.
For yourself?
So I have 2 different swap partners. One's in the US and one's in Argentina. So I've got a 90-minute swap session every week where I'm the client. So that's pretty good.
Yeah.
But like I do yoga twice a week. I do Qigong. I'm a recent fan of Qigong because there's no words, there's no thinking. It's just working with the energy system with, movement. Meditation. Nature, I just think nature is such a good one for helping us to be present and getting out of our heads and that sort of thing. Buteyko breathing. I mean, I just do so much stuff because I sort of didn't realise until I started doing EFT that I really did have vicarious trauma from that job in sexual assault. Because nobody talked about it, right? Everybody had it probably, really, but nobody really talked about it. But like I would wake up and I had been dreaming all night, right? I'd be in the emergency department with someone who'd just been sexually assaulted, or I'd be in the courtroom for hours and hours with lawyers hounding, victims. And, I used to wake up and I would be so tired because I felt like I'd been at work all night and then I'd have to go to work. So I really, I used EFT to help me recover from burnout and help me get out of that job. And I don't think I've ever really been back there. But I certainly did recognise recently that I was kind of done with hearing trauma stories all day, every day.
Yeah.
It
has an impact.
Yeah. And so now all I do is training and mentoring. Like I have actually finished my private practice. I don't see clients. I don't take clients anymore. I still work with my mentees and I work with EFT practitioners. Like I never want to stop doing EFT, but I just felt like that's enough. 35 years of being a social worker, I think that's enough.
Apart from the nightmares bit, is a good sign. What are other signs though? Like how can practitioners and even early practitioners like you are mentoring and supervising them, how can they be aware that they might be starting to be affected? Like dreams are one thing, but what else?
Look, I talk a lot to my mentees about capacity, right? How do you know when you're at capacity? And it might be things like I can't respond to emails, I can't deal with my children, drinking more alcohol, withdrawing from others because you don't want to listen to their anything, like not wanting to be in social situations because you're just sick of listening to people. Like poor sleep, not doing the self-care thing. Or here's the flip side that I see actually often with mental health professionals is, and this was me before I really discovered EFT, and sometimes during, my whole life was spent doing self-care. Like all my spare time, I felt like I've got to do so much self-care so I can go back to that horrible job and serve myself up to that again. And at one stage it was like
too much.
Crazy. Well, it's not, you're not dealing with the problem. The problem is the job is too much, right? Yeah. So, and it was a bit the same recently. It's like I had heaps of clients and I had heaps of mentees and it was too much. So I'm having to do lots and lots and lots of self-care to deal with everything being too much. And then when I went on a silent meditation retreat and it really hit me, how about you just let one of those things go, Jules? And I did. I just let the client work go. I do a lot of tapping to do it. But then it wasn't too much anymore. So I think that if you're using self-care or alcohol or drugs or exercise, anything, if it feels like you actually really need that to get by, then you maybe got to look at your life.
Yeah.
And I really hammer in the capacity thing, you know what I mean? Like you need to be regulated. You need to be working within your own capacity so that people can co-regulate with you. If you're dysregulated and you're kind of acting like you're fine and you're not, it's not helpful to you. It's not helpful for them. Yeah. So I feel like I still have to do a lot to kind of keep on top of it all, but I enjoy it, right? It's not a chore for me. I love all that.
And it's about developing that insight, isn't it? In that kind of your own signs. Knowing we want our clients to know their own signs, but we have to know our own. And when is that? We were just talking about clients are often your own mirror.
Your mirrors,
that you need to and committing to that journey of personal transformation and growth. And like you said, 2 sessions a week as a client, like that's a unique position. We're often, even as EFT trainers or experts or whatever, we're not often in a client seat where we're sitting there as the client, and that's a unique position. Yeah, I can only imagine.
We need to be.
Yeah.
Look,
we're coming to the end. Any words of wisdom, EFT practitioners out there that perhaps have been doing this for a long time or coming in new because they want to embrace this as a career choice, to work in this sexual trauma, or even if what I find my graduates, they don't want to work in it, but yet it comes up. So we kind of say, look, know how to deal with it so that if it comes up, face. But any kind of words of wisdom to help guide people if they want to do embrace, working in this field?
Oh, yeah, look, I just think it's a beautiful area to work, really, because, people tell me stuff that they've never told another soul in their whole life. You know what I mean? Like if you're holding space for people around such kind of fragile, deep wounds and hurt, to be able to actually help people with stuff like that it's the bee's knees if you're a mental health professional, or an EFT practitioner. I mean, that's why you become either of those things or both of those things. It's because you really want to be able to help people. And, like I said, if you work the way that I'm recommending, which is kind of future-focused and not really going back into memories so much, I never even know what's happened to most of my clients. I seriously have no idea most of the time. So it's not like I'm hearing trauma stories all day. So don't be sort of too worried about that. You know what I mean? It's because they don't really want to talk about it. You don't necessarily have to hear it. You can help people a lot without hearing all about their trauma. So I guess to not be afraid of it, you know what I mean? Because it's actually just, it's not that different to anything else in lots of ways. I mean, I think there's unique characteristics about it, but there's ways to work. You're really just helping people with triggers. Do you know what I mean? It's
aspects and that's right. And not to underestimate the generalization effect of the banana bread, but being future focused can have that impact on things in the background without you ever having to know. I want to throw one more in there that you're absolutely doing, and that is to have a supervisor or have someone that you've got that you can go to if you are starting out in this field.
100%. And I remember you were my first you're my first mentor. I remember because I had an external clinical supervisor when I was at the sexual assault service, and she was a lovely clinical psychologist, great in the sexual assault area, but had no idea about EFT, right? So everybody needs someone that knows more than them about EFT, right? And if you're working in the field of sexual trauma, it's good to have someone that's actually has got some expertise in that field. If you're working in neurodivergent, whatever, don't come to me. I don't know anything much about that. You know what I mean? Find a supervisor whose niche is your niche, or who has a similar speciality or is at least an interest. Because I just think that's so important for us to be really solid, in ourselves, because you'll never get to the point where you know it all and it's all, everything's doesn't happen, does it? Just
No, never. It's the one thing that kind of keeps happening is learning. So
that's right.
And part of even doing this as part of this event has been fabulous, because I'm going back to listen to take notes because I need to write this down. That reminded me of a few things that I had kind of put aside and I need to bring back. So
and just one other little thing, another little tip in terms of working with people with really chronic long-term stuff. So whether it's chronic pain or chronic health issues or chronic trauma stuff, really being careful of your language in terms of what you saying EFT can do. Because, people talk about transformation and life-changing and but, I've got clients that have had 40 sessions of EFT and they've still got PTSD, right? It's not – so just to be careful that when you're doing goal setting, to make the goals small, right, to make them achievable, to make baby steps, because someone might say, I just want to finish my website, and you go, oh, that should be fine if we've got 6 sessions. Maybe not, because maybe what's under there is fear of being seen, fear of speaking up, fear of being vulnerable, fear of oversharing. It brings up all the people's stuff. So I just talk to my mentees about, we're just looking for relief, right? We're looking for relief from anxiety. We're looking for relief from overwhelm, relief from worthlessness, self-blame, guilt, shame, whatever. And hopefully it'll dissipate or go away. But I just, I like to just try to, Craig taught me this actually, Dr. Craig Winner, under promise, right? And then hope that EFT is going to help you over deliver.
Yeah, nice.
Right, but not be making big sort of, claims, oh yes, EFT is great for PTSD, we've got all this research. Yep. But I don't know, I've never tapped with you before, so I actually don't know how it's going to be for you. And you might be a 20-session person, or you might be a 3-session, and I'm feeling good enough about that, thanks. So just to be careful, because people with this background of sexual trauma, they will blame themselves. They'll think it's their fault. They won't think that you're terrible or that EFT's crap. They'll, oh, it's my fault. I'm too broken. I'm too weird. I'm too much. Do you know what I mean? So we just have to be really sensitive around what we're setting them up for. That if we're just thinking about writing the copy for the website, not finishing the website, and that might be 2 sessions worth, and that's okay.
Jules, it's just been fabulous. Wealth of knowledge there, tips, and really, if anyone's joining us, absolutely listen to Craig's interview, which is the one before Jules, and then Jules, because they both go together so nicely, and you're both saying exactly the same thing but in different kind of areas, which tells us that, being consistent and really applying these principles is really important. So thank you, Jules. We are going to move on in. Have a lovely rest of your Saturday, and I'll
thank you.
If you found this interview inspiring, I would encourage you to support the Peaceful Heart Network by going to 24hoursoftapping.com/support or clicking the link in the description. And you will see on the screen right now a playlist to all of the interviews from this year's and last year's 24 Hours of Tapping. I hope you enjoyed those as well.